let's get into it. I think it's a fine time to start. So welcome everybody. Thanks for attending this. This is a little different from the way we do a lot of WEBCON webinars, in as much as it's not a presentation, it's a conversation. Well, there's a bit of a present. I'm going to do a demo later to talk about how WEBCON BPS and InstantChange make the idea of a minimum viable product that's maximally evolvable really works. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit of WEBCON content in here. It's a WEBCON webinar. Why would you expect otherwise? But we're here to talk about ideas, not to talk about product so much. And that's why Otis has graciously consented to hang out in this. So I'm Mike Fitzmaurice. I'm the Chief Evangelist and Vice President of North America for WEBCON. Otis wears multiple hats at any given time, but he's a Microsoft valued professional and a regional director and an all-around very active member in the community, in Europe in particular, but globally as well. Otis, how many hats are you wearing these days?
Oh, not that much. Basically, I wear two main hats and one hat which I wear from time to time. Now, two main hats are really basically my own company, Nobelos, which is focused on Office 365, Microsoft 365, trusted advisory and consulting. Then there's obviously community hat, which I wear with organizing European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit. Mm-hmm. And I am serving on board as advisor on board of directors of the company called Siskit from Croatia. Many of you might know Siskit by its SP Docket and Siskit Point products. So basically, but my main time is occupied by my own company and by the conference.
Great. So 3 hats, 2 of which are particularly get particularly great use, and I'm an admirer of all 3 of them.
Thank you.
But again, this is not about us. This is about ideas. So the title's provocative, but it's provocative for a reason. We think it's true. With great power comes great responsibility. So let's get into it. Let's talk about minimum viable product. It's a great concept, very fond of the concept, but it gets abused so easily. Let's begin with a nice little quote, which is this: I think it's not so much misunderstood, but abused. It's a term that gets used for any shonky, that's a highly technical term, shonky thing we can afford to get out of the door because they've run out of time, money, and budget, or just patience. Ship anything, call it an MVP, and away we go. That's a guy named Nick Koster. He's the founder and head of training for a company called BrainMates. Look, this is a story that I think could be told over and over again by lots and lots of companies. In fact, I can't think of a single company that hasn't used the term, it's just an MVP, as an excuse. What do you think, Otis?
Oh, I think you're perfectly right. I had one discussion a few years ago when, actually 7-8 years ago, when the whole MVP thing started really getting into the gears and everything, that my problem with the term, I will going to say this a bit more drastically than Nick Koster did. The problem with MVP is that a lot of people, when they start working on a product, they set for minimum, because minimum viable product, but then they get away with less. So sure, you get something which is even less than a minimum in this scenario, and this is basically, as Nick said here, this is basically just an excuse for laziness or for running out of budget or time or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we could paraphrase what Nick said or what other people have said. It's like some people have used, hey, it's just an MVP to say it doesn't have to be designed that well. We'll design it better later. It's just a micro. In fact, if the word just appears here, I think people are missing the point of a minimum viable product. Or this one, low quality is okay, because it's just an MVP, because it's quick.
No, that's proof of concept.
Yeah. Or, okay, occasionally you get people with some professional project management experience who still use the MVP excuse, because what they're really practicing is something called Moscow rules. Have you heard of this?
No, but this sounds dodgy.
No. It's slightly old school, but it's been around for a long time. And really, Moscow rules just means this: you divide everything up into these 4 categories. You've got things that you must have, things that you should have, things that you could have, and things that you won't have, or would be nice is possibly another way to put, would like is another way to look at it, perhaps. The problem, and I have seen this all the time. In fact, a lot of Kanban boards look exactly like this, slightly different titles, but it's still Moscow rules. And the problem with Moscow rules is that pretty much it winds up where the only thing you ever do are the must-haves. And the problem with that is that everybody makes every requirement a must-have. There's no real thought as to what needs to be done and what advances the cause of the product and what advances the cause of the company.
Yeah, but you are talking about lazy excuse for a lousy product management in this case.
Of course I am. So yeah, I suppose I don't want to pick on anybody in particular or any company in particular, because I think at one point or another, every company has done this. Some have learned from their mistakes, but every company has committed them by saying, it's a minimum viable product. It doesn't have to be perfect. And again, that misunderstands the concept. There have been some people that have advanced the concept of a minimum viable product in a big way. And the people that know what they're talking about, well, maybe an example would be good. This is Cirrus Imaging. Now, software is absolutely involved in this, but what they were thinking of is, I've got it. This is an example. Otis has an example. I actually like his better, but I'm still going first.
Of course.
Well, Cirrus, I just like this story so much. Cirrus Imaging went to a guy who's a big proponent of minimum viable products, but he's a venture capitalist. So he got a pitch from a company that that was looking for money to create a network of drones that would fly over farmland and use hyperspectral cameras to collect data, thermal imaging data, and then run that through an algorithm that they had worked out that detects diseases, insect infestations, water deficiencies. It has an impact on where farmers should spray, where they should do more fertilizer, do more irrigation, that kind of thing. I believe it's called precision farming or something to that effect. So what they were looking for is the ability to pay for a whole bunch of drones and try that out. Now, what he mentioned, is, okay, you think you want to be in the drone business. And I'm looking at your proposal, my friends, and you need to test whether or not farmers are going to pay for this in the first place. Would having an algorithm that does those things be something they want? And you need to come up with a way to deliver that to them, to test it out in the most efficient way possible. And building a drone network just to see if there's a market for it is not the way you pull that off. So forget about the drones. You need the cameras to collect the data, but what is really your magic, really your secret sauce, really the thing that makes you special is your algorithm. So what you should do is, instead of, don't obsess over the cameras. What you should do instead is, why don't you just pick a small area and hire a couple of private planes and strap cameras to those planes, collect the data by hand, crunch it once in a batch job instead of in fact, don't even write. You've got the algorithm, you've implemented it in software, but you don't have a system that does it all in an automated fashion yet. But run it once, run it manually, and then see if you can sell it. And that cost them next to nothing. And so they did that. And then, so they chartered a plane, handheld camera, flew over a small area, used their algorithm to see whether or not farmers would pay for that data. And they would, and they did. So they kept going. Now you might say, okay, now that they've done this, that now they buy the drone network, right? You would think that, right? This is probably muted.
No. I just didn't realize if you were asking me. I thought you
Oh
were.
no, I was well, it was a rhetorical question, but you were welcome to chime in.
Right.
But
I would go for the drones at some point of time. I don't know if that would be that point of time.
well, you know you've got demand. So this idea has legs. This idea is something people will pay for. But what they learned in the process of coming up with a minimum viable product, because what they were selling was data, not a drone network, they realized crop dusters. Farmers found this valuable. They would pay for it. The data is valuable. The data is worth paying for, but they don't need drones. Crop dusters fly over farms all the time. They just needed to pay the crop dusters to mount their cameras to their planes. And then they had data collection for almost free. And now they are a seriously profitable and worthwhile, I think they just got sold, but the point was, exceptionally successful venture. And this is an example of a truly minimum viable product. The data that they sold to see, it was not crappy. Where they cut corners, where they focused on minimum, was not on they skimped on the product itself, because the goal was not to test the product. The goal was to test the market. This, to me, matters a lot. And this is what most people forget. They think minimum viable product is a way to make the product cheap and get away with it. Minimum viable product is how you test to see whether the market is willing to pay for what it is you're building. But hey, that's just me.
No, I would perfectly agree. I would perfectly agree with you here. The point is, in minimum viable product, as you just have this now by chance on the screen in this slide, is you can really define what is minimum for this, what you want to achieve. So in this case, they want to achieve to see if farmers want to buy this data. So that's what that's on the minimum is to show them, hey, this is how the data look like. But they needed to have this data. They needed to be able to show them this data, to show the data to farmer how it looks like. So this minimum actually needs to work. It needs to be viable. The use case, as you just got here, can be very narrow. We can expand the use case later, as you're going to see. Set on the minimum and execute it.
Yeah. You need it's not that you make the product minimum, it's that you make the product's scope minimum, and you execute on that very narrow scope very, very well. You don't get the excuse of building something crappy. You get the excuse of building something limited, but not crappy. Crappy is not an option.
So imagine if people will try to sell the drawings of the paint, so manual drawings, manual paintings of the fields, and ask the farmers, would you buy something like this, but that would look better? Everybody would say no.
Yeah.
They wouldn't sell anything.
Yeah. You minimize the scope, not the quality. And this is the other thing that people get really wrong about minimum viable product. Minimum viable product is there in order to study its usage. You build an MVP to collect data. And then you start evolving. onward and onward and onward. You fix your flaws, and then you widen the scope. And you keep widening the scope until you get to a very, very, very happy place.
Until you get a product that is still viable but not minimum anymore.
Correct. Now, you've got an example I like even better, I think.
So Mike has asked me a few days ago when we were preparing this webinar, like, what is your first thing when you think of minimal viable product? What first comes to your mind? Without much thinking, I think it took only a few seconds. Mike has said it. Raspberry Pi was on my mind. I have, I think, 5 or 6 at home doing all different stuff. One is connected to my heating system. One is the media server in my office. And one is collected as one of the Zigbee devices connected to the rest of the Zigbee stack, which I have in my home. So all different, there's a fourth one for retro gaming. I like to play ZX Spectrum, or I don't play games, computer games, but when I do, it's ZX Spectrum games from Sinclair Spectrum from 80s. So,
oh, you mean like arcade games, that kind of thing?
Right, but the proper one, Sinclair Spectrum. Everybody from Europe would know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
A little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
All good. But we forget, how did we get here? The first Raspberry Pi was really meant as an education device for the bit higher education for kids to get into electronics, into CPUs, into Python scripting. So really it was, let's get something cheap to the schools, which everybody can afford because prices were even then 20, 30 British pounds, because it's a British product originally, Raspberry Pi. So it was really used for education, some very simple servers and some very simple cron jobs. So this is a screenshot from 2013, like 6 months after Raspberry Pi came on the market. I found this on one of the Reddit groups when we were preparing this webinar, and I found this to be hilariously good. Where there's a guy telling that his 16-year-old son asked him if he can go out tonight, and the guy told him, if you send me an email from your Raspberry Pi using Python, I'll allow you to go out. It's the best parenting ever. This is what I'm going to do in 5 to 6 years. My kids are 11 and 8. But this is actually pretty cool idea. And you see how Raspberry Pi has started. So nobody thought what's going to happen next. And now we are going to tell you what happened next. Right. Raspberry Pi today, I didn't want to put that meme in our presentation slide deck that we are showing, but there was a meme going around 2-3 weeks ago of BMW rebooting its main infotainment screen, and you see the Raspberry Pi booting screen.
I love that.
There are as much as 17 Raspberry Pis in some of BMW models. Really? And not only BMW is using them. Basically, the whole industry is using them for small scope tasks. So they are now really in Internet of Things, in car industry, in automobile industry, in home automation, what I'm doing, infotainment, basically anything. But don't forget, the Raspberry Pi 4 today has more computing power than anything what NASA was putting in space shuttles in 90s and 2000s.
That's a very good point. So, and I guess,
yeah,
the idea, initially this was a little thing for educational purposes to learn how computers work in the cheapest way possible. Now it's, instead of me writing proprietary firmware and using custom chips, I can use a real computer,
put a Pi inside
in lots and lots and lots of places. Instead of it basically makes it much easier to build Internet of Things products.
Yes, just put a Pi inside. It works. It works in any flavor you want. It works in any programming language you want. You have Windows 10 IoT now for Raspberry Pi. You've got Python originally. What you have, you can use C. Basically, there is no reason not to use it.
If you really want to, you can even put Windows on a Raspberry Pi, can't
yeah,
you?
Windows 10 IoT.
Yeah.
But the point is, you could not do that 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That
Oh,
was
yeah.
a minimum viable product by the book. They had one goal. They executed on that goal. They executed well. It spread really fascinating fast. And then they started putting in more power, more features, more programming languages.
Which made it
more
useful
different
for
builds.
more things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. I guess it really comes down to, if you just break down the term, minimum does not mean lame.
No, it should not mean lame.
Minimum means minimum scope, not minimum quality. Close enough, or
No.
do you have a different take on the word minimum?
This is really its minimum scope. Make
Yeah.
it do one or few things, depends what your use case is, but make it do one thing or few things, but make it do it well.
Cool. What about viable? What does viable mean to you?
You're a native English speaker. You tell me, what's the Oxford or Webster or whatever for viable?
I don't happen to have it handy, but I will look it up while you talk. No, viable to me means, will it work, or is it sufficient, or will
Does it make sense?
needs? Yeah.
Does it make viable for me? Does it make sense to my use case? Does it really does it help me in what I'm trying or wanting to do? This is what it means for me. At least how I understand it.
I'm looking up dictionary definitions now. So
Now he's really
capable of working successfully is the general term, or feasible. In botany, actually, this might be better. In botany and biology, it means capable of germinating, living successfully, able to live. In medicine, it means able to live after birth.
So right. So if it's not viable for me, why would I have that product?
Right.
Why would I buy it? Why would I invest money in buying it? And this is now we are making 2 steps back. When you told a few minutes ago, it's about testing the market.
Not the product. Yeah.
Not the product itself. So is it viable for my industry? Is it viable for those farmers? Is it viable for the schools in the case of Raspberry Pi? Or is it viable for any possible customer when you start trying to deliver something for that group of customers, for that niche?
No, it's an excellent point. And
Mike,
then when we come to product,
you are one of the guys who started SharePoint. So you tell me, what's the product?
the product was being able to do document management. Originally, we were all, well, there were 3 different projects that got bolted together to create the very first version of SharePoint, but all of them were minimum viable products. So what we were looking for in the case of what was then called SharePoint Team Services was a way to deliver lists as a service. More than anything was about lists. The pages, that came a lot later. The documents, for that matter, came somewhat. They were basically list attachments. The team that would eventually become Windows SharePoint Services, later SharePoint Foundation, those guys were trying to get people to stop maintaining lists in Excel spreadsheets that only held didn't hold an infinite number of rows, and two people couldn't edit them at the same time. So it was built to create tables that could be held in websites, something that was web-based, that was less than Access, but that was a better use case for tracking lists than spreadsheets. Independent of that, there was a group of people that wanted to create the ability to manage documents so that you could do version control and check-in, check-out, and allow for custom metadata and categorization. those were the two minimal use cases. They were joined. They actually were released as two different things. You had SharePoint Team Services, and you had SharePoint Server. SharePoint Server got Microsoft Search bolted onto it, which just made sense. And then the notion of what was then called the digital dashboard, a portal framework, got added to as its primary UI, but that was not its original UI. UI was a much simpler web-based solution, and it was all about documents. So yeah, started off doing a minimally scoped thing to provide document management and yeah, document management and lists.
So this is how this was a nice description, a nice example. How do we create or define a product out of plethora of one or more minimum viable MVPs? So what is going to be product on the end is a difficult thing to say. Of course, you are going to have some vision, and you are going to think what do you want to do next. But then you are going to decide to put also Microsoft Content Management Server to all of that, and you get a thing that can basically do everything. As happened with SharePoint. There is nothing wrong with that. But this is how we see how we evolve from minimum, how we check if it's viable, and then we at some point of time we are also with the product, and we have something that we can call product. My problem is that a lot of MVPs which are on the market I really can't call products, because product, in my opinion, needs to be full, needs to be completed. It can have a small scope, as you said, but it should be tested. There should be documentation, there should be guidance, there should be support, there should be everything what you think about product. You can't
more than just an asset. I see what you mean.
Right. Yeah. You can't just throw an exe or a website or an app on the market and don't think of everything else. I mean, you can, but then I don't call it a product. I just call it, okay, child's play, which somehow ended up on the market.
So if I create a clever little piece of software, but I don't document it, and I don't have any training for it, and I don't have any support for it, I don't have a product.
It will die at some point of time, because people are going to start asking you questions. And if you are not able to answer them, and if you're not able to scale answering them, then it's not going to work.
So a minimum viable product is still a product. It still needs all that other stuff. The only thing we get to that you should legally or at least ethically be able to get away with, you can't skimp on the product. You could change the product from version to version pretty radically, but it still has to be a product. Minimum is minimum scope. Basically scope it down a lot so that you can actually create a product. And to me, the most key concept to all of this is viable. You're trying to create something that is viable, that will live.
It's something which makes sense to the people that you are making it for, or that you are trying to make it for.
I agree. I could not agree more. Well, we're at the halfway point, and so I feel the need to say that you're going to have a really, really, really bad time creating a minimum viable solution or product or what have you. If change is difficult, because I would expect that if you're going to make a minimum viable product, you need to commit to collecting data and acting on it. If change is hard, you're going to have a bad time. And so WEBCON is based on a certain technology we call InstantChange, and it might not be a bad thing to demonstrate this now. And Otis, I know you've seen WEBCON in action before, but if you wouldn't mind playing the role of dude with questions and asking me what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, I certainly wouldn't mind that in the slightest. What I think I'm going to do is build a solution in front of us, and I'm going to put it through some iterative changes in order to show the widening of the scope, but making sure it's complete at every step of the game.
Okay, I'm going to be that dude. Just tell me on the scale from 1 to 10, how nasty do you want me to be?
You can be cruel but fair.
Oh, that's fine.
By the way, I want to show off one thing. In the interests of time, I'm going to build the solution as a standalone web application. But before I do that, I need to show you that in order for this to be viable to a Microsoft 365 shop, we would make absolutely certain that we could take a solution and put it into a Microsoft 365 environment. So for example, here is a solution that's already been built. It's for tracking risk management use cases. It looks like I've got a couple of tasks waiting for me that I need to address where people have come up with risk assessments and I need to either agree with them or tell them that they're crazy. And I will do that in time. But in the meantime, I might want to create a new risk assessment. All of these things, and here are a couple of charts that show me of all the risks that we've been classifying, how many of them are need to improve, are acceptable, or how many we need to monitor. It looks like about 2/3 of our risks audits require being watched very, very carefully. We're comfortable about 1 in 10 and about 1 in 4. We got they're completely acceptable.
Yeah.
And in terms of where they are in our review process, they're all over the map. Okay, that's fine. This is a solution living in a standalone website. But here is that exact same solution living inside of a SharePoint site. And
Nice.
It is not just lifting this web page and dropping it in here. These are individual web parts. This really has been built and it can be deployed directly into SharePoint. In fact, here's that same solution deployed into Teams. Give me 1 second to move something out of the way. So here are all of my risks and the ability to act on them. Here are some analyses of those risks. Here are pending tasks
The
related
custom
to
forms and custom dashboards directly in Team tabs.
Yeah, basically this standalone website is actually a set of modular user interface components. You want to turn them into web parts in SharePoint? Great. You want to turn them into tabs inside of Teams? Great. If you want them to be standalone instances to work with inside of Outlook, great.
Nice. Nice.
All right. So what I'm going to build in front of you, these take a few extra moments to configure. So I'd like you to not pick on me if I don't do that. Now that you know that I can do that, we just don't have time.
We will just trust you, Fitz.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's start by building something. So I'm here inside of WEBCON BPS's Designer Studio, and I'm going to create a new application. And let's call this the scope that we're going to address first and foremost is whether or not there is a need for making sure that let's see, probably the most immediate thing is that we want things to be reviewed by at least 2 steps. And we want to make sure that basically our marketing department, our public relations department is putting out press releases, and they're sometimes terrible. The people writing it don't understand the subject matter. So let's call this press release. And let's try to spell press release. And let's see. There we go. The process name. Now in WEBCON speak, the application is the entire solution from start to finish. All the reports, all the dashboards, the forms, the data, the workflow. The process is the workflow plus the forms plus the data, the process is the workflow plus the form plus the data. So I'm going to give the process a name, much like I would name a table, if you would. So let's call this press releases. And then the form type will be a press release. Acronym will be, actually, yeah, press release review, maybe. Workflow name will be press release. Let's say it's cradle to grave thing, so it's life cycle. All right, and let's start this. All right, we've just created an application. It's empty. There's nothing inside it. We don't have any pages or dashboards or anything, but we do have a workflow. There it is. It's not, we need to do a little bit more before I consider it to be viable. And there's a form here. And again, it's really simple because we actually don't know what form fields we need yet. We will, but we don't know this yet. And so what I would like to do here is start with the process. So what we'll do here maybe is assign the creation of a press release. Let's zoom out a little bit. I want to do the life cycle, and we'll make this better later, but all I want to do is make sure that a manager assigns somebody the task of creating a press release, and then that person authors it. So let's create a second step called authoring. Whoops. And let's do this. I didn't mean to open it. It does no harm by being opened. I just was saving that till later. And we'll move from assign to authoring. The reason I'm doing it this way, just so you know, is a lot of people that are used to the Power Platform, flows go from top to bottom. A lot of people familiar with more formal business processing solutions tends to go left to right. I'm going to split the difference and go diagonally just because I love everybody. And so let's call the verb start. And in fact, let's use proper state machine parlance. So these are verbs: assignment, authoring, then we need reviewing or under review. And then if it passes, then it's approved. And if it does not pass, then it is rejected. And maybe we put it over here. Or canceled, maybe. All right, so I'm going to need some arrows. There we go. Let's move this a little bit further over to the side. And here, if it's approved, we send it here. Let's call this approve. Let's call this submit. And I also need to have a way to go from under review to canceled. And so let's do this. Let's call this reject. And I will zoom out a little bit just to make sure we've got some elbow room to look at all of this. So this is our minimum viable workflow. It at least allows me to assign stuff to authors. It allows me to have the author run something for review and then have somebody review it before it goes out. This will be my first attempt at a minimum viable product. Let me save this. And I'm going to do one other thing, because as you have pointed out, I can't get away with it being insufficient. I need a little bit more in order to make this viable. So I don't just want people creating these. I want them to be able to see all the stuff that's monitoring it is a basic requirement. So let's add what we call a report. A report in WEBCON is really an interactive data view. It's very similar to a list view inside of SharePoint, if you would. So let's call this press releases, because this is what users will see. And what are we going to, okay, we're just going to show one process, which is press release. If we had multiple forms, we could choose to show certain forms and not others, but this is good. And in terms of columns, we don't have custom fields yet, but we do know who created it, and we probably want to have that show up. In fact, let's also have the date created, or date and time created for that matter, appearing inside of this. And we can change the order a little bit. Okay, and you'll notice that certain fields are already here, like the instance number. This is the ID number. It's a friendly number. You'll see that in a minute. And I want to know what step we are in the review process and how long we've been waiting there and to whom this has been assigned. And you know something? Well, let's leave it here. This is going to be wrong, and you'll see why in just a moment. But I will click Save Application. And so now, oh, and I need to do one small extra thing. I just want to add a new button to that report. Now we could get better about this, but this will be enough to get started. Let's jump over and take a look at that solution. No custom fields yet. I need to get this out there and collect some data from users to see whether or not we're on the right track. And first thing we'll do here is under press release management, and I will open up this report and I will create a new press release. Now, let's assume that well, okay, fine. Let's add an attachment. We need to have a press release in order to say we're doing this. So I will just pick anything.
Take a TXT file, this will be good.
Yeah, we're not going to open it, but yes, in real life, it would be a Word document. In fact, we could create one here, but this is not really about editing. We're going to leverage the built-in comments field to collect some information, at least at the very, very beginning. So I create a proposal and I send it out. And first thing I'm being told is there's no person to assign the workflow instance to. Check the configuration. Two things are going on that are really, really important. Thing number one is I forgot where I am. I'm in the assigned stage. I shouldn't be attaching anything just yet unless it's reference material. The press release isn't supposed to be created until it gets to authoring. And what's more, I haven't assigned it to anyone. So the very first thing is I didn't do this right. This has to be officially assigned to somebody, and I need to choose to whom it will be assigned. So we actually do need at least one form field. And that form field is going to be author. And author is going to be a person or group. There we go. And here's the other thing, because I don't want the manager attaching something first. What we're going to do here, here's where author appears in the form. But we have this thing called a field matrix, and it allows us to see all the steps in the workflow process and whether or not fields should show up at that point, or whether they should be read only or read write. So here in the assignment step, author not only has to be visible, it needs to be required. And then when it moves from there to authoring, let me move that out of the way. Okay, I don't want the author changing the author, so it can show up, but it should be read only. Mm-hmm. And then same thing with under review, same thing with approved and canceled. Let's see, anything else that needs to change? Oh yeah, standard areas. So why don't we do this? Let me see. No. This is all fine. Oh, wait, right panel. I don't want attachments to show up at the very, very beginning. Not when assignment is going on. It can show up at every other step after that, but we aren't going to show it during that initial assignment. And you were talking about the importance of documentation and user instructions. Let's throw some in. So let's go back here to assignment, and I'll put some instructions. Put some descriptive text explaining what you want in comments and choose an author. All right, so that'll be instructions to the user for that step. Actually, let's just move forward. So while authoring, you've been asked to write a press release. Check the comments for directions. And then under review, please review this press release. And then I suppose if we just want to finish the job, the press release was approved and can be published. And if it's canceled, there. All right. And for that matter, let's go back here to the report that we built. And now created by is really not the, this is the manager that requested it. So why don't we improve this a little bit and say requested by. And what we're going to do is maybe even remove that, but we're going to put author in and move it up there. Okay, let's reload this form and start working on it. The author, I will make this person, and comments write about our new pizza delivery guarantee starting October 1st. Okay, and oh, okay. I did put a field in there, but I need to modify my workflow to say assign it to that person. So when you assign, when you give somebody a task in WEBCON BPS, what you're really doing is assigning them the responsibility for the item during that step. So I am assigning responsibility during the authoring stage to, actually, it's none of these predefined roles. It's instead going to go to the person in the author field. And for that matter, when it gets submitted, we need to choose who's going to do the reviewing. Now that can be a fixed person or that can be a built-in role. Here, I'm going to force it to be assigned to somebody. It could be completely determined by queries and so on and so forth, but I'm going to keep this simple and I'm going to assign it to this person, Alice. And let's put that in there. Realistically, in the real world, I would make that a group, and I would also have emails sent out and people CC'd and all that good stuff. All right, let's close this and let's save this. Now, because it's InstantChange, here's the fun part. I don't need to recall this and restart it again just to fix it. If I click Start Now, away it goes. InstantChange is good for modifying stuff on the fly. So I can open this and see where it is. In fact, let's do that. I don't need that telemetry on the side if I don't want it, but there it is. You can see where it is and what's going on.
What you are telling me, Mike, that you are basically able to reflow the running workflows, active workflows, and to reroute them based on the change that you have just implemented.
Yeah, I don't even need to, I'll tell them to reroute themselves. I'm communicating with them in real time as they move. Yeah, it's very handy. I don't need to bring them back and have them start again. And I don't need to just accept the fact that they're wrong when they finish. Yeah, it's very handy. In fact, I'm going to make a couple of extra changes here because I see that, well, let's see. What I don't get is a clear picture of what's going on. I mean, I see the steps, but I might actually want to give somebody a visual representation of the process. So let's stop here for a moment, and I'm going to generate a preview and save this. Now check out what happens when I do that. If I have created a preview, now users can see where it is at any given point in time in a visual way if they want to. You don't have to do that. Oh, and you mentioned documentation. So we're already underway. You know what we can do? Let's generate documentation for this solution. And when I say documentation, I mean pretty complete documentation. So I'm taking the preview that we created. I'm taking the form definition, the field definitions, and I've run it through the metadata for the application. And I've run it through a Word document template. And I have created this. And I think it's, yeah, there it is.
So there you go, paradise for lazy developers.
Yeah, up until you get to here, this is all about how any WEBCON application works, like terms, like what do we mean by a report and what do we mean by a step and all of that. But then we start describing your application right here. And there's a picture of the running workflow. Here's an explanation of every step we go through. Here's a description of every single field. And this is making use of the exact same descriptors that we put there. In fact, if we come over here to Bill, who's been asked to create a new item, let's go look in his active tasks. And he's been given the task of writing about our new pizza delivery guarantee starting October 1st. So, and here is instructions. You've been asked to write, you know, yada, yada, yada. So let's go ahead and drop a Word document in here and now submit it. And so now it's no longer in Bill's task list and he's free to ignore this until somebody reacts to it. Me, I kind of want to see what's going on. So I'm coming back here and I'm noticing now that this has been, it's in the under review step and it's been assigned to Alice. Okay. Now, these tabs along the bottom, they're logged in as different users. They're different Chrome profiles. And now I will come here and I'll look at this from Alice's point of view, and she has been asked to approve or reject this. Now, at this point, let's say we've done this 5 or 6 times. And this is yet another one. And we realize that every time Alice says no, this is requiring us to start the whole thing over again. I have to once again assign something to Bill. Bill has to once again create a document or find the one he already wrote and then attach it to the form and then send it along again. And Alice has to once again look at a brand new document. It's not really easy to look at her feedback or even ensure that she gives feedback. She could just click reject and kill it. Let's say we've taken that feedback and we realize we aren't quite viable yet. We need to get this to viability, and then we start expanding the scope. So what we want to do here is, if it is rejected, I don't want it to be canceled. I want it to go back to the author. And so if it is rejected, I'm going to assign this to the author. And what's more, I'm going to insist that the reviewer provide comments. And I will allow, well, canceled should probably still exist. And I'll leave it here for now. But how it gets canceled is probably a decision the assigner has to make, or the editor has to make. But that's all right. Now, here's the fun part. We were talking about InstantChange, right? I'm not even refreshing the form, Otis. Check this out. Now we're going to have Alice reject this. And she's told first that she needs to provide a comment. Okay.
Nice.
Bad spelling. Reject. Okay. If we were still following the original rules, this would be now rejected, except now we've gone back to authoring and Bill's got it. So let's go back to Bill.
We are back on the second step.
Exactly. And he sees Alice's comments and my initial comments, and now he can start working on this. And yes, we do allow you to open up the Word document and use Word document review type stuff where it's, you know, using Office Web Access and or actual Word and so on. So we can do this and we can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And let's say we did that. Now we've got something that is collecting feedback and allowing us to follow this from start to finish. We would probably start widening the scope. We probably might want to introduce the notion of the author saying, I'm not the right person to do this. And so we'll institute something like refuse. And we'll also allow the manager to decide to just cancel the whole project. And we probably want there to be more than one reviewer. So I might want to add more steps that involve reviews. Let's zoom out a little bit. The point is, you saw me modify the application once while it was running. In the world of WEBCON, we could do this many, many times. In fact, let's call this technical. First one is technical review. This will be, instead of technical review, this will be editorial review. Editor doesn't want to see it until the tech reviewer likes it. It has to be accurate before we're willing to send it along. And so that if we have a problem, the editor sends it back. And so on and so forth. We might even, eventually, we're going to have possibly more fields on the form. We're certainly going to have more steps in the process, and we'll have more stuff to report on in the reports. But you've seen essentially the building blocks for how we do applications at WEBCON. We don't expect them to be right the first time. We expect them to be good the first time. We do things like user instructions, because when Bill's working on this, he sees what he's supposed to do. We do see full documentation and full understanding of the whole thing, but we get to keep widening the scope as the product evolves, and we get to keep fixing it as we discover flaws.
Exactly as you have been speaking before.
Yep. That's how we do what we do. For what it's worth.
You know what? I'm very proud of you that you were not smashing competition because I don't think that many of your competitors have this.
No, none of the usual suspects out there really have this. And the companies, there are just a couple of other companies that can do something similar to this, but they're pretty darn expensive. This is actually incredibly affordable. It's not free, but it's not crazy expensive, and it really does allow for this kind of world where you keep reacting to user input. The engine is designed around this kind of thing, and when you build a solution, it's got workflows and document management, or document OCR and document generation built in, and forms and reports. And then we do support connectivity to web services and directories and databases and such. And then the application that you build can be surfaced lots in many, many, many places. Certainly in a standalone environment, but also in a mobile app or custom web app or SharePoint or Teams or Outlook and such. And that's us, man.
That's very nice.
That's a better way to workflow is the way I like to think of it. The WEBCON way.
Okay. That's a nice animation.
Well, thank you. Wait, let's go back. Anyway, what I was going to say is thank you, everybody, for sticking with us and watching this. If you'd like to know more information, webcon.com. And Otis, thank you very, very, very much for helping out with this.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I learned a few new things about WEBCON.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them out in the chat window. We kind of enjoy that.
Do we have a chat window?
We do. I believe we do. I've been hit with chats before. Maybe not. I could have sworn there was a chat window here.
I don't see a chat window around here. Anyway, then we need to thank the people, and yeah.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. This session has been recorded, and we will post it on YouTube within the next couple of days. Hey, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
And have a great evening, everybody else from Europe. Bye.
Yes, indeed. Good night, everyone in Europe, and have a great day, everybody in North America. Bye now.
Bye.